Inside the Classroom takes an in-depth look at one of Team Hardin County Schools' best teachers in action, featuring comments, class instruction, and insight inside the classroom.
I became a teacher. I felt like it was a calling, and I wanted to make a positive difference in my children's lives. I wanted them to be able to see, the potential that lies within them, and so I felt like, being a teacher would let me do that. So that's why I became a teacher. All right, guys, the Symphony of Wales, 476 and 477. Can somebody tell me what the genre is? Ellie, what's the genre?
Fiction.
So what's that mean?
It sometimes tells a story based on events that really did happen.
Yep, it is something made up. Now, it could be about something that really did happen, but it's a made-up story. Somebody made it up. Remember, fiction is fake. And look at the question of the week right there on page 477. How can people help animals in danger? We have a responsibility to little animals or big animals to help them when they're in danger, all right? And so we're going to learn today about how one little girl did that, all right? So turn the page over, and we're going to get started. Automatically on page 478, we see a vocab word, right? Put your finger on a vocab word. Somebody read me that vocab word. It's one of our words this week. Kira, what is it?
Blizzard.
What is blizzards? What is a blizzard, Kira? Well, I had a couple of teachers who inspired me to teach. My 5th grade teacher, Miss Howard, and I had a teacher in high school, Mr. Sisk. And both of these teachers just really inspired the love of learning in me, and so they inspired me to be a teacher. It's like a snowstorm, isn't it? Where you can't really see very well. It's really cold. It's dangerous to drive in. So it looks like whatever we're going to be talking about today, they live in an area that gets blizzards, okay? So put your finger at the top, and you should be able to read the word that I stop at. From the earliest time she could remember, Gloshka had heard music inside her head. During the long, dark winters, blizzards sometimes lasted for days. Then her family stayed indoors, close to the small fire. Gloshka heard the songs calling at her out of the darkness beyond even the voice of the wind. The old ones of her village said, "That is the voice of Narna, the whale. Long has she been a friend to our people. She was a friend of our grandparents' grandparents. She was a friend before we saw the boats of strange men from other lands. But it is long now since one of us has heard her. It's a great gift that you have." And Gloshka would fall asleep wrapped in her sealskin blanket, remembering their words. The sea gave life to Gloshka's village. The seals gave meat and warm furs to protect against the winter cold. In summer, the people caught salmon and other fish and salted them to keep them for the hard times to come. And from Narna, the people received food for themselves and their sled dogs, waterproof skins for their parkas and boots, and oil for their lamps in the long winter darkness. One year, the snows came early. For 3 days, a blizzard bore down on the village. When it finally stopped, Gloshka's family needed supplies from the next village. There's another vocab word, supplies. What are supplies? Reed, what are supplies?
They're equipment you need for like climbing things.
Yeah, for anything, right? Equipment that we need or tools that we need for some things.
Ms. Hawkins, she's an effective teacher because first and foremost, she puts the kids first. The first thing she does is she builds those relationships with the kids, gets to know them one-on-one, knows something important about each one of them, and really builds that feeling of trust with all of her children.
Her family needed supplies, but it's been a blizzard for 3 days. Do you think it's going to be safe to go outside in a blizzard? No. So they have to wait it out. They have to wait until the blizzard's over, and then they can go outside. Now, here in Kentucky, if we have a blizzard, do you think it's safe to drive even if the blizzard's over?
Yes. No.
It's not, right? Because the roads are still going to be pretty bad. People have to come and clear those roads for us. But it looks like where Gloshka lives, they might be a little bit more prepared for that. What did they say they used to travel with? They mentioned it slightly because they said they had to feed these creatures. What do they travel with, Riley? Well, what's their transportation? Do they hop in a car and go somewhere? What do they use to get them around place to place? Riley?
Sled dogs.
They use sled dogs. So even if there's been a blizzard outside and there's snow on the ground, they have sleds that they can easily be pulled in the snow.
Miss Hawkins makes learning fun because, like, she's really nice and she does a lot of fun things with us.
When the blizzard stopped, Gloshka's family needed supplies from the next village over. So that's a reason to go out. So Gloshka asked if she might help drive the sled dogs. It's not so easy to drive the sled, her parents said. The dogs will know if you are uncertain of the way, but you will know the way home. Perhaps on the way back, you may try. Now go to sleep.
Miss Hawkins, how she makes learning fun, she doesn't just give us hard things all the time. She kind of gives us easy things, and there now she gives us kind of hard things, and so it's kind of fun not just doing hard things all the time.
If we stop here real quick and we think about this, I want you guys to think about how the setting of the story creates a problem for the characters. We don't have a problem yet, right? But we know in a fictional story there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. And there's a problem that happens, and then it gets solved. So what do you think is going to be a problem in the story, just based on the setting? It's kind of like a prediction you're making. I want you to think about that. What could the problem be here? There could be a lot of problems, right? Especially if you live in wilderness with wild animals. But what could be the problem here? I want you to talk to the person sitting across from you and tell them what you think a problem is going to be.
I enjoy probably doing science because Miss Hawkins is pretty good at science, and I like when she's really good at science.
All right, ready? In 3, 2, 1. Carson, what did you guys talk about? What did you say a problem could be? Oh, like you're looking at that picture on the next page, and it looks like maybe they're trying to get across and they can't? Something like that, or maybe, okay, something to do with ice. Because we know if it's really cold, water freezes, and they could get trapped on ice, or they could maybe not make it across. We're doing whole group reading, and they are going to be reading a story with me. I read the story out loud, and then we stop periodically, and we discuss what we're reading and reinforce the reading skill that we're learning about this week, which is making generalizations. It might be another blizzard that comes up, and then they have trouble getting back home. Well, let's find out. Flip the page over, okay? On page 480, put your finger at the very top. That night in her dreams, Gloshka drove the dog sled, but the dogs did not follow her commands. Instead, they led her to open water surrounded by ice. Gloshka heard the singing of Narna louder than she had ever heard it before. She awoke in the darkness of her sealskins, wondering what the dream had meant. The morning was clear and cold as the family set out. The dogs made good time to the neighboring village. Before starting back, Gloshka's parents packed the supplies into the sled. Gloshka checked the dogs' feet for cuts. She rubbed their ears and necks. Gloshka's parents gave her the reins. We'll follow behind you. If your heart and your words are clear, the dogs will listen and take you where you wish to go. They set off across the ice. Snow swirled as the wind began to pick up. Suddenly, the sled dogs broke from the trail, yelping and twitching their ears. "What is it?" Gloshka's parents shouted. "I think they hear something," Gloshka called back. The sled dogs pulled harder. Their keen ears could pick up high-pitched notes that most humans couldn't hear. But Gloshka, if she turned just right, could make out the eerie moans and whistles that grew louder until even her parents could hear them. The dogs stopped short. They were right at the edge of a great bay of open water surrounded on all sides by ice and snow. Everywhere Gloshka looked, the water seemed to be heaving and boiling, choked with white whales. Her father came up beside her. "Beluga whales," he said softly. Gloshka stared. There must be more than 1,000 of them. The cries of the whales rose and fell on the wind as they swam slowly about. The dogs whined and pawed anxiously at the ice. "Let's hurry to the village," cried Gloshka. "We'll get help."
Ms. Hawkins makes learning fun is by doing mystery pictures on like times, division.
We've got a few vocab words there. Surrounded. What does it mean to be surrounded by something? On all sides, right? So if something is on, thank you, sweetheart. If something is on all sides of you, then you're surrounded by it. And so that's what happened. When the dogs led them to open water, they were surrounded by ice on all sides.
Ms. Hawkins, she gives us a second chance she says, "I'm giving you one more chance to fix it." Like, she does that.
We have another vocab word, bay. Do you all know what a bay is? What might a bay mean? What does that mean? What do you guys think? A bay is a large area of water, okay? And you have land here and land here and land here. And it's almost all surrounded by water, but that would be called something else, right? If that was surrounded all by water, it'd be called like a lake or a pond, or surrounded by land. But a bay is surrounded by land on 3 sides, and then there's like a little way that you can get out into a larger body of water, usually an ocean. So if this is the ocean and this is a bay, there's like a little, kind of like a little passageway that connects them, okay? And there's a word we call that. I heard some people saying it, which we'll talk about here in a second, okay? Some of you already know. That's awesome.
Miss Hawkins is very good about giving kids ownership of their work. She has been very instrumental in student data notebooks. She puts the responsibility on the kids to keep up with their work and to take ownership of it.
All right, but we have one more vocab word on this page, anxiously. If you're anxious about something, what does that mean, Ellie? Like you're really anxious.
Like you're ready for it to happen. Like when you get a shot, you're ready for it to happen. Like,
Yes. You want it over with. So you gotta become impatient. And you're like, oh, I just want it to get over with. I just want to get this done and move on. So they're waiting anxiously, right? It says the dogs whined and pawed anxiously. Can animals be anxious about something too? Yeah, the dogs were. They were anxious about it.
Ms. Hawkins, she, like, during Christmas, she does a lot of fun, like, coloring activities, and we get to hang them, take them home and, like, hang them on our refrigerator.
So who are our characters so far? Who's our main character, Riley? Gloshka, right? And then who else is in the story that we know about so far? Samara?
Her mom,
Yeah, her mom and somebody else too.
her brother.
I don't think it mentioned a brother, but it mentioned her dad, right? Her mom and her dad. So we've got her mom, her dad, and her, and then we have the sled dogs. And then about how many whales, the beluga whales, did they see, Brayley? 1,000 of them, okay? So we still don't know what the problem is, right? We kind of are getting there because the dogs inched up to the ice and they stopped. Well, that's a problem because it's not taking them home. But there's a bigger problem in this story, and we're going to find out here in the next couple pages. So,
I enjoy doing daily fix-its because we can learn how to write and we get to learn how to spell.
we kind of did talk about the problem, right? They are wanting to go get help. Who are they wanting to get help for? What's wrong, Carson?
They're trying to get supplies, but they're just surrounded. So
They are trying to get supplies, but flip back to page 481 and look at the very bottom. I think we were a little bit worried about vocab words, but let's make sure we know what's going on here. It says the cries of the whales. When you cry, what's your feeling? Like when you cry, how do you feel usually? Caroline?
sad.
You usually feel sad or mad sometimes, right? Some people can cry when they're happy, but these whales are crying out. So we know that it's one of these three feelings, right? Well, it says the dogs whined and pawed anxiously on the ice. So now the dogs are kind of upset because they're whining, right? Usually when we whine, we're upset. We don't whine when we're happy. And then they say, let's hurry to the village. We'll get help. Well, wonder why they need help. Let's see. I would say the best practices I use to reach every student in my classroom is at the very beginning of the school year, I have them take a love language quiz. And this helps me to realize how I can love them, how they will respond to love. There's 5 love languages, the gifts, acts of service, touch, time, and words of affirmation. And so, you know, if a student is struggling, I can give them a hug if their love language is touch, and they respond well to that. If one of the students, their love language is words of affirmation, I know I can say, hey, you did a great job, and they really respond to that. So it helps me to figure out, you know, my students' needs that way. I also use pre and post assessment, so before I start teaching any of the standards, I pretty much know, you know, if they already know it, if they've already mastered it, what they need, and then that way I can challenge the ones who already know, and if they don't, I know exactly what resources to pull. I also use a lot of small group instruction in my classroom, and so that way I have them grouped and working, you know, in a small group or even one-on-one. I can really reach them that way too. So I would say the last thing is probably the leader in me. When they can see the true potential that they have in themselves and they keep track of their learning using data binders, then it helps them to succeed a lot more than if I just kept track of all that. So we kind of did talk about the problem, right? They are wanting to go get help. Who are they wanting to get help for? What's wrong, Carson?
They're trying to get supplies, but they're just surrounded.
They are trying to get supplies, but flip back to page 481 and look at the very bottom. I think we were a little bit worried about vocab words, but let's make sure we know what's going on here. It says the cries of the whales. When you cry, what's your feeling? Like when you cry, how do you feel usually? Caroline?
Sad.
You usually feel sad. Or mad sometimes, right? Some people can cry when they're happy, but these whales are crying out. So we know that it's one of these three feelings, right? Well, it says the dogs whined and pawed anxiously on the ice. So now the dogs are kind of upset because they're whining, right? Usually when we whine, we're upset. We don't whine when we're happy. And then they say, let's hurry to the village. We'll get help. Well, wonder why they need help. Let's see.
Miss Hawkins teaches us the 7 habits because they're really fun to learn.
Gloshka's father, though, knew there was no help. They must have been trapped when they came here last fall looking for food, he said quietly. There's nothing we can do to free them. When the last of the water freezes over, those whales will die. But Gloshka's mother remembered that an icebreaker several winters ago had rescued a Russian freighter trapped in the sea ice. Could we call on the emergency radio? Maybe an icebreaker can clear a channel for the whales, she said. Now, what's a channel? What is a channel? Like, oh, I know, I get my remote control and I go, okay, I want to change the channel. What is a channel, Krusha?
Is when there's one day and there's a little stream connects into another day.
Yep, this would be a channel right here. And it connects the bay with the ocean. And so they're thinking, and the bay is where they are, right? The dogs are right here on the edge, and all this is frozen. All around it's frozen right here. And it's starting to freeze through here, okay? And so the whales are trapped inside the bay. All right, there's a little bit of water that's not frozen in the middle. You can tell from the pictures. But all this bay is completely surrounded by ice, and they're trapped in there. Well, I mean, they're sea animals, so why aren't they fine in water? They could just go down deeper, right?
And they go thick ice, and it could be like, it could be going thicker and thicker, and there's like
Not enough water down there. Well, what do we know about whales? What do we know about whales that are special? What do we know, Haley?
They're mammals.
They are mammals, so they need to what?
They need air.
They need air. And so they could, I mean, they live in the water. They could go down deeper, but they have to come up. Those blowholes that they have on their back, they have to get air. And so if all of the bay freezes over, they will all die.
Miss Hawkins, she Miss Hawkins, she lets us do the math, and then if we get it wrong, we just have to do the thing over. And then, not the whole thing, but we get to do the question over. And then if we get it right, then we go on to the next paper.
Gloshka's father got on the emergency radio and put out a distress call. Beluga whales, maybe thousands of them, trapped. We need an icebreaker. Can anyone hear me? Far out at sea, a great Russian icebreaker named the Moskva picked up the faint signal. We read you, the captain radioed back. We're on our way, but it may take us several weeks to reach you. Can you keep the whales alive until then? Some of the people from Gloshka's village started setting up a base camp near the Others set out by dog sled to alert the surrounding settlements. Everyone came, young and old, parents, grandparents, and children. Day after day, they chipped back the edges of the ice, trying to make room for the whales to come up to breathe. Look, said Gloshka's grandmother, see how the whales are taking turns, how they give the younger ones extra time for air.
Some of the practices Ms. Hawkins uses really focus around student ownership of their work. She practices student data notebooks, has kids keep up with their work, and really understand where they are and where they need to be. She does student-led conferences where the kids present their work to the parents. She really just sits back and lets the kids take over with that, and again, it just gives the kids ownership, and most parents come away pretty impressed.
I want you to close your eyes real quick, and I want you to think of these whales that are trapped in the bay, and I want you to think of the older whales and then the young baby whales. Those older whales are going down towards the bottom where there's more room and letting the younger ones come up for air more than they're getting air themselves. Think about that sacrifice that they're making for the young whales. Now, what can we say about these animals? Kind of some of the same traits that we said about Gloshka. What can we say about them? Yeah, they're nice to each other.
I enjoy writing because I'm a really good writer.
They're taking turns. So what habit does that sound like? Synergizing, working together, and think win-win. Yeah, they're thinking win-win because they're taking turns coming up. And even the older ones know that the younger ones may need more time, so they're giving them more time. I would say the greatest joy in the classroom is watching the students teach each other. Especially something that I've taught them, or, using the same language that I use because I know they're really listening. That is probably the greatest joy. Whenever they reach a goal and they're so excited about it, that makes me really excited too. As Gloshka took her turn chipping back the ice, the song of Narna filled her ears again. She sang to the whales while she worked, trying to let them know help was on the way. Each day, Gloshka looked anxiously for a ship, but each day a little more water turned to ice. Each day, the whales got weaker from hunger. Gloshka knew how it felt to be hungry. The year before, her village had caught barely enough fish to make it through to spring. Sometimes the memory still gnawed at her. Even so, she gave the whales part of the fish from her lunch.
Since Ms. Hawkins got here, she has been very vocal about her ideas. She doesn't sit on good ideas. She presents them to the administration. She presents them to her PLC. She's a leader in her PLC. If she's got a practice that she thinks is effective, she's willing to share it. She has presented ideas at small professional learning activities. She just wants to share good ideas.
The other villagers noticed, and they began to feed some of their own winter fish to the whales too. One morning, Gloshka awoke to the sounds of excited voices and barking dogs. What do you think they see? The icebreaker. The icebreaker had broken through the main channel during the night. Hurry, Gloshka! Her parents called. Gloshka pulled on her boots and parka and ran down the path to the water. Everyone was gathered. Off to one side, the old ones stood watching. They beckoned Gloshka to join them. Come on, come on. You almost see them going, come on, look, it's coming, it's here.
Since Ms. Hawkins has come to our school, she's been a valuable asset. She's a teacher leader. She empowers others, teachers and students, and we feel really very privileged to have her on staff.
The whales crowded together in fear, keeping as far from the icebreaker as possible. What? They finally have a solution, right? The icebreaker's here to break up the ice. And what are the whales doing?
They think that the icebreaker's there to get them.
Yeah, it's probably noisy and it's scary. So they're like, no, we're not following that icebreaker. No, we're getting as far as we can. I believe teachers are important because we are with these students, most of the day, and so we have such a great impact on their lives. We truly do shape who they become when they grow up, and they do have good memories or bad memories from school. And I just think that teachers are so important because we could be a positive role models in these kids' lives, because we have them so often. They may be afraid of the noise of our engines, the captain radioed ashore. I've heard that trapped whales will sometimes follow the singing of other whales. We'll try playing a recording of whale songs. Gloshka felt a shiver down her back. Narna songs, she whispered to the sled dogs. They're going to play Narna songs. Do you guys think it's going to work? Give me a thumbs up if you think the whales will follow Narna songs. Thumbs down if you think they don't. All right, so we have some mixed opinions.
Ms. Hawkins was nominated as an Excel finalist because you can see the relationship she has with kids. Years after they leave her classroom, the kids will come back and share where they are with their grades and what's going on in their life, and you can really just see that positive relationship she has with kids. And she's a very, very effective teacher with her instruction, and she just brings a lot to our staff.
Quickly, Gloshka and the old ones radioed the ship. Have you any other music, people music, to play for the whales? They asked. The captain said he would see what his crew could find. First, they tried playing rock and roll. And the electric guitars and drums boomed, but the whales would not follow the ship. I am just so honored and humbled by this recognition, and so I just wanted to thank Mr. Bender for believing in me, and I'm so excited. My kids are excited because I told them, and they were very happy for me, and so I just am so humbled and honored. The crew found some classical music. First, the sweet sounds of violins and violas. Next, the deeper notes of the cellos, and deepest of all, the string basses. The way up high, a solo violin. Everyone fell silent as the melody carried over the water.
I'll remember Miss Hawkins because she's fun and she's nice to talk with.
So you think they're going to follow now? Give me a thumbs up if you think they'll follow classical music. Kind of that music we listen to, a symphony.
Miss Hawkins is a teacher that I'll remember because of that. Later on in the year, she'll probably teach me many of things that I haven't already learned and be very helpful in life when I grow up, and so I'll probably remember her for those things.
Cautiously, the captain started the huge engines and headed slowly out to sea. One whale followed, then another, and then a few more. Soon all the whales were following the ship through the narrow channel, past the broken chunks of ice, back to the safety of the open ocean. On shore, people laughed and cried and hugged each other. And what kind of cry is that? A happy cry, right?
I'll remember Miss Hawkins because she's really nice to me and she always tells me to try harder.
Gloshka buried her wet face in the fur of the dogs' necks. Such good, good dogs, she told them over and over. Such good dogs. Now the whales are going home. On board the ship, the captain and his crew raised every flag. The music played as the captain radioed to say the whales were safe. He and his crew were finally going home too.
Miss Hawkins she's a teacher that students remember because she gets to know them. She is interested in them as people. She doesn't see them as just students who come in for a year. She forms those relationships with them, and you can tell she genuinely cares about them.
Gloshka and her family looked out to sea. They waved to the icebreaker and the disappearing whales. And do you hear Narna singing now? Her grandmother asked. Yes, Gloshka said. But it isn't just Narna I hear now. It's something bigger than that, something like a whole symphony of wails. And we know a symphony is a lot of instruments and voices at once.